Hey everybody, and here I have Piper Gibson with me today, expert in epigenetics and tic disorders in kids. So I'm going to give you a little run over of her, and then we're going to hand it over to her to give us a little bit about her expertise and also a personal story in this field because naturally, a lot of practitioners who are experts in their field have this personal story of why they got into it. It has a really deep meaning to them. So we want to definitely talk to her about that. So thanks for joining, Piper. Can I give a little run over of you?
Yeah, awesome.
Let's do this. Piper and I met, just for everybody, Piper and I met at a summit, and it was absolutely wonderful to connect with her. She has so much knowledge in, even the genetics side of things, the epigenetics side of things. And so her knowledge in this field, it's absolutely outstanding. Not a lot of people are talking about this. So if any parents are coming on to this, they definitely need to listen up because this could definitely help your child and your whole family. So a little bit of a run over. Piper's a doctor of functional medicine, doctor of advanced holistic nutrition, traditional naturopathic doctor, and board certified doctor of natural medicine. If that's not qualified, I don't know what is. So that's awesome. And she really works, like I said, with parents, and they're scared and they're frustrated, they're overwhelmed. And they need to get access to tools which she has to start reducing their child's tic disorders symptoms naturally. And maybe early on we can talk about like what these symptoms look like, right? So it doesn't affect their child's life throughout their lives. And then not only all of that, she's an international best-selling author and the founder of the Tic Disorder Institute called Regenerating Health. We'll talk a little bit about how you can get a hold of her. Her foundational program teaches parents holistic methods that will restore their children's health in the face of potentially confusing and worrying diagnoses. So amazing, because how many parents out there right now are so confused about what to do with their child's health based on this grandiose world we live in, full of toxins and etc. So we'll talk about that. And, she went from a stay-at-home mom to a children's holistic health expert. And so I love the fact that you are a mother and you can speak into this space. And she's just been helping families around the globe. We even learned that, she had some clients in New Zealand, and around the globe, just, really understanding their children's tic disorders and using lab testing, food, which I love to talk about, and even natural approaches to help their kids. And last but not least, she's a corporate educator in GX Sciences, which was recently featured in Authority magazine. And she can also be heard on Autism Wellbeing Podcast and 15-Minute Matrix. So you can find her everywhere. And we're so grateful to have you today. So, Piper, why don't you give us a little bit of a background of how you got into this and what is a tic disorder for people who have no idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the tic disorder piece and then I'll explain how I ended up here. So, a tic disorder is a movement disorder. Many people hear it labeled as Tourette's. So, a Tourette's diagnosis is given to someone who's had a tic for over a year, and it includes multiple factors. So, it includes a vocal tic where maybe they're making a sound or saying a name or repetitive word, and they're doing some kind of bodily movement. So, my son's tic started out as neck jerking and eye blinking, and it was incredibly severe. So that is really kind of how I found fell into it. My son got sick. So 13 years ago, we had gone on this incredible family vacation. We had a blast. We ate all the donuts and drank all the chocolate milk, and we had so much fun. And we came home, and the next morning we woke up and my son was just jerking his neck and twitching and clapping his hands and jumping up and down. And we were like, "Whoa, what is happening here?" So we took some video. We went to the pediatrician. The pediatrician was like, "Well, we think it's a tick." And I'm thinking, what the heck is wrong with my child's brain? And when we talk about a tick, it's the movement. We're not talking about the little bug. We're not talking Lyme disease. And so we went to the neurologist, and the neurologist was basically like, I'm not kidding, when he looked at me in the face and said, "I think your son just needs a good spanking." I was floored and I said, "Absolutely not. This is ridiculous. My child cannot control his bodily movements. Spanking is not in order." So, we went doctor after doctor, prescription after prescription, and the conventional approach just really failed us. And so I went back to school and relearned everything I thought I knew about health and wellness in order to help my son. My goal was to help my son to figure out why this switch had been flipped and why he had gone from pretty
It's an
standard.
overnight thing,
Yeah.
literally overnight. Okay.
Well, At the time, we thought it was overnight, but I can now look back to like the day he was born and start to see things kind of creeping in. Like I can look at the patterns, and so therefore I'm really good at doing it for my clients. But it was really a matter of I wanted to help him, and we were so successful with him that people just started coming to me, and here we are 8 years later after I've got earned all the education, and yes, we are focusing on neurological tic disorders.
Love it. Love it. And just where's your son at now based on everything that he's been through?
Well, he's waiting for a tow truck.
So he's driving. That's good.
Right. So, yes, he's doing things I never thought he would do. He is 19, he is in college, he is thriving. He is about to apply for the university fire department. He joined a fraternity, like all of these things that I thought this child's never going to be able to do. I mean, it was so severe. The moods were so bad. I had at one point pulled him out of school and homeschooled him because he just couldn't function in regular society. And we've done all of the work, and now he's doing fabulous.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So how would a parent even start to understand, or what symptoms could they look for saying, okay, what would my child express, so to speak, in their environment of what would show you they would fall into this category of maybe having tics?
I see a pretty typical pattern. A lot of parents will come to me and be like, my child started with an eye blinking tic. So they're just blinking constantly. They go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, it's allergies. And then they put them on allergy medication. So eye blinking is really one of those first signs. Um, any kind of like neck movements, uncontrollable movements where you're like, stop doing that. And they're like, I can't stop doing it. That right there is your sign. Or maybe they are, my son glommed onto the word Francisco, and he would say Francisco 9,000 times a day. So there's this kind of repetitive OCD vocal tic. Some people will make an animal noise. I've got some kids who will have a sniffing tic. So there's definitely a lot of signs to look for, but one of the biggest signs, regardless of a tic disorder or a tic movement, is you can see pretty early on the kids that are going or may have issues like ADHD, anxiety, behavior, those kinds of things, when they're either constipated or they have chronic diarrhea. So when their digestion is off and their gut health is off, usually years down the road, we start to see that they're having these ADHD issues, anxiety issues, behavior issues. So, looking at the gut early on is really kind of one of those early things that we are looking at.
Okay. And so the gut, interesting because a lot of people are into this now and how the gut speaks to the brain, let's say. So when we talk about the word epigenetics, we talk about how someone is expressing themselves in their environment and so on. So this is kind of where tics dives in. But let's talk about even the epigenetics around food, what we're feeding ourselves in our environments. What would you recommend for people, even if their kid is starting to have a gut issue and hasn't expressed that far down the road? What works?
Yeah, so I love a gluten-free, dairy-free, low-sugar diet. It works really, really well, and it's fairly easy this day and age to do a gluten-free, dairy-free, low-sugar diet. Number one thing to do, these kids are eating far too much sugar. If you're like, I don't know that I'm ready to cut gluten and dairy, start with the sugar. You don't need all of the packaged processed sugar, and you don't need 400 pieces of fruit a day. I mean, yes, they have fiber, but we're overdoing it, and we're eating far too much of the good things as well. So, start by cutting the sugar. We know from a 2023 study done by Julie Matthews that for kids who have tic disorders, the best diet you can follow is a paleo style diet, followed by gluten-free, dairy-free, low sugar, and then food sensitivity diets. So in my practice, I basically take all three and combine them, and create a very individualized plan for all of our clients.
Are there any top foods in there that you see across the board where you're saying, okay, everyone could really benefit from X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, definitely that connection for the gluten and the dairy and the sugar.
Mhm.
There's several studies involved around all of them. When it comes to Tourette's, there was a study, I want to say like 2018, where they looked at gluten, dairy, and sugar, and they found that 70% of the participants saw a decrease in symptoms when they took them out. But the Tourette's Association didn't accept it because there wasn't enough people in the study. So there wasn't enough participants. So it wasn't highly published, but the details and the information are out there. But I definitely see if you have a kid who has a gut issue, dairy is usually a huge culprit for constipation, but on the other hand, it can be a huge culprit for diarrhea. It really depends on the individual. So I really look at like if you're having the focus issues and gut issues, definitely looking at just try it for several months, 2 to 3 months, try a gluten-free, dairy-free, low sugar diet and see how that goes for you.
Right. And so parents are probably thinking, okay, I'm going to cut all this out. There's no food left in my fridge. So, what would you suggest are the top things to add in?
Yes, look at whole foods diet. So, looking at animal protein, we know that animal protein actually has better amino acid profiles than plant proteins. So, looking at, the grass-fed beef and the wild caught fish and the pastured chicken. So, getting plenty of protein is really going to help with that neurotransmitter production because that's where we're using those amino acids to make those neurotransmitters. Looking at, fresh vegetables, fruits, healthy fats. And when I'm talking about fruits, like I said, you don't need 57,000 pieces in a day. One or two is going to cut it. Berries are a great source of fiber, a great source of those phytonutrients. But really focusing on those whole foods, just stay out of the center aisles at the grocery store where you're going to eat or be tempted to eat all of the junk.
Right, right. And so if someone just changes food alone, and in our epigenetics field, we say that's an environmental change.
Right.
That's one out of probably many factors. But since we're on the topic of food, when you change that one thing, what's the biggest result that you've noticed in kids by just changing that? And you said kind of a 2 to 3 month period. What do you notice?
So for my clients, a lot of people, not every one of them, but a lot of people start to see that reduction in the tick symptoms. We're reducing the inflammation in the body by removing those inflammatory foods. So we start to see that definitely, I was with a client this morning and they were like, he's just so much calmer. They start to calm down. They start to be able to focus and function and think clearly. And so a lot of times I've really felt this when my boys were little. It was always like, I'd say something about behavior to the doctor and she'd be like, oh, it's just because they're boys. It's just because they're boys. And I'm like, now that I look back at it, I can see how much food was impacting that negative behavior. And when we took it out, even teachers were like, and doctors and family members were like, what did you do to this child? So definitely like you start to see a calming effect for sure.
Okay. And then what else have you noticed? What else have you had to change? So food's a big thing because we're doing this, 3 or 4 or 5 times a day eating, right? But what else have you noticed in regards to human activity, even like sleep and things like that?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Rest is definitely key. I mean, we have kids that are like with their iPads 24/7 like this. Um, and
I was
there's some
hoping this would come up.
yeah, there's really some interesting research around this, and one of them is called screen apnea, where your breathing changes when you're looking at the screens. And so we have these little kids who are watching all of these like Peppa Pig or whatever they're watching on their screens, and it every 3 to 5 seconds it changes their breathing. So they're like they're catching their breath. It changes their breathing patterns. So one is the way that they're breathing is being impacted by the screens. Like we're seeing these studies on screen apnea. So one, we're seeing the breathing patterns, but two, it is affecting the sleep because you have these kids that are 24/7 with the screens in their face. It's not how humans were designed. So one is get the screens out of your room, get the electronics out of your room. I mean, even having like an alarm clock that's plugged into the wall next to your bed might be giving off some EMFs. Like trying to give yourself a nice, cool, quiet, dark space where your child can sleep because they are going to do most of that repair work on their body, on their immune system at night while they're resting. So sleep is absolutely key and absolutely critical for these kids. Um, Really looking at movement as well. I mean, when we're back to the screens, there's so many kids that just exercise their thumbs. Like they come home from school and they sit on their butts and they're exercising their thumbs. We need kids out being active. We're going to make and utilize neurotransmitters better in our gut when we're active. It's going to help our digestion. So exercise is key. And then of course, when we look at all of the environmental factors, that is a huge part as well. And we do a lot of changes in regard to that.
Yeah, and so environmental factors we've gone over sleep, nutrition. I'm gonna say, what about socialization and friends group? Because we know that plays a big role in community building and building relationships and how we shape our behaviors in the world. What do you think around this and tics, and how can parents help their kids thrive, even if they, I guess, don't have tics as well? And they're saying, okay, my child still has a behavior issue. I'm going to do the cleanup that you suggested, which I think is amazing. What do you see around like influences around social?
Yeah,
I
so
read.
I ran into this when my children were little. I was in a lot of different moms groups, and there were moms who would be like, "I don't want her to play with. Well, I don't want their kids to play with our kids because they don't behave." And so, what really mattered to us was when we started changing the diet, we started to see those changes in behavior, and so it was much easier for my kids to get out and be social because they weren't having this clogged up system, and their behavior was so much better. So that was really part of it, but it really is important to have this socialization. I think the issue for a lot of kids with tics and Tourette's is that it's an outward symptom. Like, people can see it. And so a lot of these kids feel ridiculed or looked down on. And so it's really about getting parents involved, explaining to them, making sure that they have a good friend group that is not damaging and is really on the helpful piece. And so, yes, it's important, but I do feel like kids in this area really struggle because so many of them are really embarrassed about not being able to control those bodily movements.
Right. And then how could a parent group, let's say, who doesn't have a child with tics, how could we support these kids? Well, like, what would a parent and a
Yes,
child want? Like, what would they want?
definitely explaining to their peers. And maybe your child isn't old enough to explain it, but you as a parent can explain it to your peers. Is really, that's an uncontrollable movement. We are doing these things to work on it. Really explaining your situation and just being open and honest about it, and just letting people know, like, this is not something that they can control. We are working on it. And I think what freaks some people out about Tourette's is what they see on TV is people are cussing and like this kind of thing. It's actually very rare. That's not really I've had two clients who've had that issue. um, but I think it's a matter of really just getting in and educating people. So you as a parent want to have a good understanding of whatever it is your child is dealing with, and then have to be able to turn around and kind of explain that to, and you'll have to explain it to family, you'll have to explain it to friends. So for us, one of the best ways that we do that is we record everybody's results. We do a lot of testing, we record their results, and I say share this with your friends and your family so that they have a better understanding of what's really going on inside your child's body.
Right. I love that. Yeah. And do you guys offer those resources to, everyone coming into the program? Like even like school teachers, for example, that might not know how to deal with this. Do you guys offer some
We
resources?
do offer resources, and I will tell you there's tons of free resources on my website and on my YouTube channel. So great places for people to reference.
Can you plug in
Um,
your YouTube?
yeah. So my YouTube is, you want me to just put the link in here?
That or say it out loud and we'll put
Okay.
the link in below too.
Yeah. So our YouTube is Tic Disorder Secrets.
Great. Okay.
And then my website is www.regenerating.health, but tons of good free information. And that's something that my clients love, whether they have been a longtime client or they're just coming in. I have so many parents who are like, we really truly appreciate all of your free resources because it gave us such an education that we're not getting from the conventional space.
Mhm. Wonderful. Oh, thanks for that. I think that's going to help loads
Yeah.
of people just understand. And just, I want to dive into a little bit. So I want your internal personal story as
Okay.
well, which we spoke about. And I'd love to save that for the end because it's like, what was your journey around this as a parent? Oftentimes, we're putting so much effort into our children, and it's like, well, what was your learnings? What was your journey? How do you see the world differently, kind of thing? But before that, I just wanted to ask, so is this inherited? And around like the genetic testing that you do and things like that, how can a parent comprehend this? Or is this, developed, or is this turned on? How do you explain that
Yeah.
to a parent?
So there is some research about tics and Tourette's and them being genetic. However, the piece of that that's missing is they don't know if there is a certain gene or a collection of gene. There is really not a positive single thing that says, hey, this is based on genetics. However, but what we can tell you is that when we see people who have it genetically, like maybe dad had it or mom had it, is it's the way that it's expressed. So when we're changing that epigenetic environment, we can actually say it's just like saying you have the genes for colon cancer or you have the genes for breast cancer. You have them doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you know you have them. So how do you alter your environment to change the way that your genes are expressing, the way that they are working? So that's really one of the ways that like we look at it. The genetics I look at are actually, we're not looking at it for a specific tics or Tourette's gene. We're actually looking at it for one immune response. But we're looking at it and using it as a roadmap. So in my practice, everybody does our genetic panel, and we are looking at like what is your predisposition to inflammation? How well do you detoxify? What does your glutathione, genetic pathway look like? What does your autophagy pathway look like? And then we use that as a roadmap to be able to alter the environment. So many people will say, well, you don't need genetic testing. You can just change your environment. And I say baloney, because when you have it, you know your genes and you are going to be so much more compliant with the changes because you're like, hey, this is my genetics. Oh, I shouldn't be eating gluten. Oh, I know that I have this predisposition for chronic aggressive inflammation. These are the things I need to do to really kind of keep that tamped down. So it's really, when I'm looking at genetics from that perspective, is I take the genes and I connect them with all of the other results, the stool pathogen, the organic acids, like really being able to look at that. And then we can create a plan based off of that. So yes, there may be a genetic factor, but we know we can calm that response by changing the environment.
Wonderful. Epigenetics explained to its very best.
There you go.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. And a lot of people find that word epigenetics daunting. How do I turn on and off a gene and so on? So it's like you've just taken everyone on this wonderful journey of like how impactful food is and so on. But having that blueprint of yourself or your child is so important because that blueprint's not really going to change.
Right.
You're not going to change that. And then you have that when you're a child and you can use that for your whole life, really. Um,
Yeah.
to many levels, I'm sure, so yes, tics, but then maybe, something else comes up in life of how we deal with, PTSD and stress and things like that. And they could still come back to you and say, I'm stressed. And you say, okay, well, maybe this part's expressing, right? Like you
Yeah.
can dive in deeper and deeper and deeper on their journey, which is wonderful.
Exactly. And something that's been really cool with the kids is that we've seen them become incredible athletes. And we do this in my house just because we know what supplements they need. So my kids have been good athletes. But we have this client in Australia who started out with the tics. When she and I had a conversation, she goes, a year ago when we started, she goes, my son couldn't run 5 minutes to save his life. He was a couch potato. Like if Tiger was chasing him too bad, he was getting eaten. Like he could not. A year later, after going through the whole protocol and getting the genetic nutrition on board, he's winning state track championships.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's really like, yes, we're using it for one thing, but we can, just like you said, turn around and use it for so many other factors throughout
Right.
our life.
Yeah. What an amazing gift for parents and kids, right? Like they don't have to live with this.
Nope.
Yeah. So if they think they're at the end of the road, they're not. There's always a
Exactly.
solution.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to dive in then. So we talked about, parents, kids, and all the logistics around this, and it's amazing. But, let's talk about your journey as a practitioner as
Yeah.
well, and a mom. And how did it feel for you on the way? What did you learn about yourself?
I, and this is really a perspective that I've kind of always had, is that I can do anything if I put my mind to it. And so this was a huge change for me. And the joke for us is I have a bachelor's degree in fashion design. I worked
You.
Yes, I do.
Wonderful.
I worked for a denim manufacturer, so I worked in jeans for about 6 months. It was the worst job I've ever had. I hated it. I was like, this is not for me. So the joke is when God said you should work in jeans, he meant DNA, not denim.
I
Um,
like that.
but yes, so for me, it was really like doing doing a 180 on my knowledge and really learning something completely new from scratch. And it just I went down the rabbit hole. I started researching and then I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to go back to school. So I think it really changed me and it put me on a whole new pathway that I never 20 years ago imagined that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. And I love it so immensely. The genetics, the helping the families, like I just love it. So it's definitely changed my whole entire roadmap.
Yeah. And did you discover anything deep about yourself on the way? Because we talk about epigenetics, right? And I always think, okay, it's great to talk about what we're giving and on this planet, but oftentimes we discover talents of ourselves perhaps on the way. Did you discover anything about yourself?
Yes, so
That-
I had anxiety, and when I was a kid, it wasn't classified as an anxiety, but I had had anxiety my whole entire life. When I was little, I was extremely paranoid. I was afraid everybody wanted to kidnap me, and I hated going out in public 'cause people would look at me. I'm like, "Don't look at me." Um, I was a very anxious child, and it wasn't until I was in college that I was struggling, and I went to the health center, and they were like, "Oh, take some Paxil," which did not help me at all.
Mhm.
But it really gave me that label of anxiety. I thought that was just me, that was my personality, that's who I was. But when my son got so sick and we ended up doing doing the genetics on him, I ran my genetics panel as well. And I found out some very interesting things about myself and about my own health. And I was able to alter my diet. So, really getting rid of gluten for me changed my life 1000%. Like, I used to hear voices in my head, and it was a whole like, it was really bad, and people ask me about my experience with gluten. I'm like, "Well, I feel like gluten actually made me suicidal." Like, it was really that bad for me. So, 1, it was
A toxin for you.
yes, it was very neurotoxic for me. So, 1, getting out of the gluten, but 2, really figuring out what I needed in my own methylation pathways, and I no longer struggle with lifelong anxiety. I haven't for about 10 years, because I was able to alter my environment and make sure I was getting the right nutrition from the right sources, and it absolutely changed my life. And so, not only that, but I feel like because of that, when you've had that experience, it makes you a better practitioner because you've lived it and you know.
Yeah, totally. And could I just ask, like, what were your symptoms of anxiety, even, going through? You said like kind of some paranoia and things like that, but when you ate gluten, um, was it still that paranoia kind of stuff?
Worse.
Worse.
Worse, it really made me and I here I am public platform really owning up to all of this. It made me very violent. Like, I would get in a fight with my husband and I would throw things because I just could not internally control my response to anything. Like, he knows if I accidentally get gluten and I start flying off the handle, he is like, "Okay, what happened? What did you eat?" Because now he can pick it up. But, it was made me violent, it made me paranoid. It was really, really bad for me.
Yeah. I actually sit in a similar boat to
Do
you
you?
around that too. It's just more around like a depressive state.
Mhm.
If I have low depressive, don't want to see anybody, and I'm like a happy person, you know? And so it's like that complete opposite and flip. And I think, as two practitioners sharing this, it's important for people to know we're human too, right? But I often think, the toxins involved and what goes into a wheat product is incredible these days, and people really need to know that. So I think, full I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I'm always like, cut it out. And they're like, oh, a little bit, or I'll go sourdough or something like this. And they're looking for an alternative source. I'm like, toast your sweet potato.
100% get rid of gluten is my
Yeah.
recommendation for sure. And you
Yeah.
know what's funny is that I know I cannot eat gluten here at all, but we were in Kyiv in Ukraine for a while, and I did experiment because it's European, and so I experimented with it, but oddly enough in the United States it doesn't impact my gut. It impacts my brain. But in Europe, it totally impacted my gut. So it was kind of so many people say they can go to Europe and eat gluten.
Yeah.
I just really strictly cannot because I'm going to have some reaction to it. But I agree with you. I think, the fact that we cut down our wheat and we spray it with glyphosate is, I mean, detrimental right off the bat. So just really feel like if you're struggling, get rid of gluten for like 2 months. Just get rid of all of it. Don't look for your substitution. Just get it out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you said to substitute. Well, people say, well, what do I eat then? That's always what I get to. And I was like, okay, just meat and veg. Just go meat and
Yeah.
veg. And like you had touched on it, organic, grass fed, and so on. So yeah. And so just I mean, this has been absolutely fantastic. And I just want to end this off is a couple things. Do you do any kind of like mindset work daily? Because with everything you've been through as a mother and a practitioner and flipping your life around to doing something brand new, like, that's not necessarily an easy thing for people to do,
Yeah.
going on their path. Like, what is your mindset around this? What do you practice?
Yeah, so I love meditation. It's very calming to me. But I actually have, and then this is going to sound woo-woo. I've tried tons of different therapies. I've had some traumatic experiences in my life where I've tried, the talk therapy. I actually have an energy healer that I work with.
Beautiful.
Um, 10 years ago, it would not have been something I would ever have tried. But I was like, you know what? Let's try it. Let's see what happens. It's completely changed my life. So we do a lot of work around like where did the trauma start and then clearing that energy. So, it's really changed my life. And a lot of those quote unquote woo woo things really have some basis, and they really work for some people. So I do a lot of that. I do a lot of meditation. I'm a really just kind of positive, like can do person anyway. Like I said, I've always been like, teach me to do it. I can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that because in the course that I offer practitioners, I actually give them a really practical energy component healing. We
Oh,
are at the end of the day still helping people heal. It's just been split off into
mhm.
categories and I guess classified in
Right.
certain ways, but you're still a healer. I'm still a healer. It's just, what kind of category do you fit into? So it's wonderful that you're open to going to other alternative things that could actually help you. This is so great. And so just two more things,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. Looking back, because you started this about 8, 10 years ago, right? What would you say to yourself 10 years ago, knowing what you know now?
Buckle up for a long ride. Buckle up for a long ride.
Yeah.
Um, because I think, and I see this so often with the families that I'm working with, is that you cannot see the forest through the trees. And really for us, it took us so long on the healing journey. I mean, we had lived our way into it for 6 years. And I would say it probably took us about 6 years to really live our way out of it as well. I mean, we're 13 years in, but it was really a matter of just how we were going to get his immune system back on track. And I could have gone, conventional's like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Um, if I had just given up, we wouldn't be where we are today. So, buckle up for the long road and the long ride. And it's not always going to be easy, but there really is hope at the end of the tunnel. That, you just, and light at the end of the tunnel, you just have to stick to it. The changes, it's the long-term changes to me that I really see the difference in.
Yeah. I really appreciate your commitment to that journey because not only has it helped you and your own family, but now you're reaching people globally and it's giving them hope at the end of the day as well. And they might not have that 10-year cycle like you went through, right?
Yeah.
Because you can help them probably a little bit faster because
Exactly.
you did the hard
Exactly.
yards.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at, 18 months, a year to 18 months to really seeing some big changes where like we just had to work our way into it. But even then, because of the society we live in, people want instant gratification. And I'm like, nope, you got to live your way out of it.
Totally. And lastly then, what would you say to parents that are looking to start out on this journey and they're already stressed, they're already frustrated, they don't know what to do? What would you say to them? What advice would you give them?
Number one, if you're a parent who's dealing with this, is take a good look at yourself first, because anxious parents breed anxious children. If you cannot manage yourself, you are not going to manage your child with a chronic illness very well. Manage yourself first. Get yourself into a really good place with your health, with your mindset. Get yourself into a good place and know that you're going to have to buckle up for that long ride. And so that your child needs someone who's going to be like, we can do this. And it's going to be hard, but we're going to get there. So really number one is taking a good look at yourself and how you handle that as a parent. And number two, just with that realization that you're going to have ups and downs. It's going to be a roller coaster. Um, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So we recommend that parents who are really interested in learning more and making these changes is one, they could go to our website for all the free info. It's regenerating.health. But two, we offer a free consultation to anybody who wants it. So you can go to our website, regenerating.health, book a call with our team. I think it just says free initial consultation, and book a call with our team. The person who takes those calls, her daughter has been through my program, so she's a fantastic person to speak to. A lot of the people on my team have been through my program, worked with their kids, and then I hire them. So, I really feel like for parents, there's hope, but you also have to be able to manage yourself well in that.
Mhm. I love that. And I was just going to actually ask where people can find you. So that's great. They can book a free consultation on if they're thinking, okay, this is where I need to start with my kid, and discuss probably some of their more, some of their issues and symptoms that they're having, to see if they're a right fit with you guys. And I guess from a personal note, when I met you at Mindshare and we're sitting around that epigenetic table, I don't know if you remember that. I remember that. I was like, wow, when I started asking you what you did and, what kind of testing you use and things like that, I was like, holy smokes, this lady's done her homework. This is really amazing. And well, I'm speaking from my
Oh,
perspective in
no,
the
thank
world.
you.
It's like, I find I wasn't really aligning with people in the industry anymore, because I was like, well, I do my stuff this way and I'm more alternative, if you will. But I think this conversation is actually should be the mainstream model. And I appreciate all your openness and everything that you've, even shared with me on the way, because this is what's going to really uplift, our communities into longevity at the end of the day. So, Piper, what you're doing is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
anything else you wanted to add in?
Yeah. So, on that note, is we actually later this year are launching a genomics practitioner certification program. So
Amazing.
providers that are interested in learning, the way that we're using specialty genomics in practice can get certified as an integrative genomic specialist. So, we're doing other things outside of just working with the neurological disorders, because the genetics for me is such a huge passion, and people ask me like, how do you do it? And so it's come time that I'm like, all right, let me teach you.
Great. So this is like the next step on your
This is
journey.
the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Time to get out there and share your knowledge, because you have lots of it. All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Piper. You're amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne.